Okay, so again, we'll back up a little bit for the video, for those that aren't here. King James I, his beliefs in the divine right of kings put him into conflict with Parliament, the lawmaking body of England. And this quarrel between the king and Parliament even became more intense during the reign of King Charles I, who ruled from 1629 to 1640 without even using the governing body or lawmaking body of the country. Just made up his own rules. It'd be like President Obama not listening to one thing Congress said, making up his own rules. Okay, you can't do that. But they did it. So what happens when your country's in disarray and you're not being governed, but we have more or less a dictator? Is that what we have here with these kings in a way? What happens when there's a big disagreement between all these different factions? What does your country end up being in? What type of war? A civil war. So that's what happened. Because of this continued conflict between the kings of England and Parliament, in 1642, England went into a civil war, fighting among themselves. And Charles I didn't come out too good on this deal. Because what happened to him during this civil war? He died. How did he die, Nick? He was beheaded. Okay? So because of this conflict between kings during the reign of Charles I, the country of England plunged into civil war in 1642, and as a result, King Charles was beheaded. And guess who ran England from that time until 1658? This is kind of interesting. From 1642 to 1658, what religious organization ran England that we've talked about? No? Puritans. The Puritans did, because Oliver Cromwell, who was a leader of the Puritans, actually led England until he died in 1658. So England was run by the Puritans, those that wanted to purify the Church of England because they thought it was too much like the Roman Catholic Church. They ran England from the time Charles was beheaded until Cromwell's death in 1658. Now, during this Civil War and this Puritan reign was when a ton of English people did what? Left the country for the New World. This is when the big migration began. Okay? Does everybody kind of see what's happening here? Now we're going to talk about economic changes in Europe. Now put yourself in the place of somebody living in England during this time. I'm going to kind of explain this to you. Now we're going to develop 13 colonies, are we not, in America? Before I get done with this lecture at the end of this year, then on. But we're going to talk about settling the northern colonies and settling the middle colonies and settling southern colonies. But the thing that really was a big factor that contributed into the 13 colonies were economic issues in Europe. Economic issues in Europe. Because not only are people coming to the New World because of religion, they're going to be sweeping to the New World because of economic problems. Okay? What do we call a problem of rising prices? Because rising prices in England is going to lead to this whole thing. Prices went up. So all of a sudden, you guys have to pay, how much do you have to pay for a yearbook? 35 bucks or 50? 50 bucks? 50 bucks. All of a sudden, you show up next year, and the administration says, not only are yearbooks 100 bucks, but you have to buy them if you're going to go to school here. What might somebody do? They might leave and go where? They might go to Powell or Tent Sleep or somewhere else because they can't afford it. What is the problem of rising prices called? It's called the same thing today. Inflation. And that's what happened is inflation skyrocketed in Europe. Now, was England the only one that had colonies in the New World? No, Spain did. A lot of European countries had colonies in the New World, right? And what was the goal of these colonists when they first came to America? What were they to look for? Gold, mainly. Well, what happened is Spain for some reason, had a ton of American colonies spread out all over, not the 13 colony area, all over in there. Okay? And so their colonists were sending gold and silver back into Spain. Okay, so Spain was becoming pretty darn wealthy. Okay?
They already had colonies before?
There were colonies that came over from the time that, we're talking about English. England plants the Jamestown seedling. We've been talking about England. That's a good question. But Spain had colonies over here. The Dutch had, a lot of people had people in America. Okay? But we were just talking about England. So Spain had quite a few successful colonies over there, and they were pouring this gold and silver back to Spain. Okay? Now, it's all supply and demand. If Spain has all kinds of money, they're going to be able to buy more and more products from other countries that they don't have, right? What is that called? That called becoming dependent on foreign trade. If you trade outside the country, that's foreign trade. Okay, do we produce enough oil in this country to just, we have so much we're exporting it to the Middle East? No, we don't. So what do we do with oil in this country? We import it like crazy. And if we couldn't import it, might we be in trouble? Yeah, well, Spain got that way. They became so dependent on buying things from foreign countries, it made them dependent on foreign trade, including trading with which country that we're talking about? England. Now, think about it. Think about it a little bit. If Keller is selling 30-06 shells, and I'm really needing some, and I got me a lot of money, but he's got all the 30-06 shells. I mean, there isn't any in Germany, and there isn't any in France. He's got a bunch of them, and I want them bad. He knows I got a lot of money. What is he going to do? He's going to charge me about twice. You know what 22, anybody know anything about 22 shells these days? 22 shells, and this is off the cuff, but it makes sense at this lecture. 22 shells. You could shoot, when I was a kid, if you paid a penny a shell, you were overpaying. I mean, you could buy 1,000 22 shells for 10 bucks, easy. How much is 1,000 a brick now? $100 bucks.
The 500 packs used to be like 20, and then I saw one for sale for like 50.
Oh, it's incredible. They're selling 1,000 rounds for $100 bucks now. About a buck a shot. 22 shells. Why? Because supply and demand. They're not making a bunch of 22 shells now. They're spending their time making 30-06 shells and 243s and all these AK guns now. All these semi-automatic guns that are shooting shells. They're making those. So there's not a lot of 22 shells out there. So you go to a gun show and buy a brick or 1,000 22 shells. They're going to cost you $100 bucks. Where I can remember them costing you 10 bucks when I was a kid. Okay? Well, that's supply and demand. So if he's sitting there with all the 30-06 shells and I want some, he's going to charge me about twice as much as they're worth because he's got the supply and demand. Well, he lives in Rogersville, okay? And he's got all these 30-06 shells, but there's a lot of people who live in Rogersville. All you guys live in Rogersville, and all of you like 30-06 shells. But he's the guy that's got them all, right? And I'm coming from Dursville, and we ain't got any. That's double negative. We ain't got any. And so I go to him and say, Keller, I need some 30-06 shells. So how much are they? I'm used to paying about 25 bucks a box. But he says, I got all kinds of boxes. I'll say as many as you want for 50 bucks a box. Well, do you think he's going to sell them to Rogersville's people any cheaper than he's selling them to me? No. So who suffers? The English. When Spain went to trade with England, they knew Spain had a lot of money, so what did they do? They jacked up their prices and everything. And they didn't lower them for the people that lived in England, and so it became a huge problem. Okay? A huge problem. So it's all a domino effect. So how did he get these 30-06 shells? He doesn't know how to make them. Okay, he's the seller. He's the merchant. How did he get them? Well, he got them from a wholesale house that got them from the people that put them together and reloaded them. So everybody starts raising their prices. Farmers raise their prices. They sell their stuff for more to the manufacturers because the manufacturers, are going to sell their stuff more to the person that's selling them, to the merchant, and it just is a domino effect. So people began to really become in tough Straits. As prices rose higher and higher, it affected thousands of English families. Does that make sense? And it all was because we were ripping Spain off in the long run because they had so much money. So as the price of wool and raw material rose to make cloth in England, what did English landowners do? Now put this in perspective. So I own land. Okay? I own land. But I don't know. I really don't make enough money on that land for me to work it, so what do I do with my land?
Sell it.
No, you don't sell it. You lease it out to a farmer. And the farmer pays you so much a year to use your land, and then they make the profits off that. Well, that's okay. You know, I got this big 100-acre tract. I'm making, I mean, what's wheat worth nowadays? Anybody know? What's the price of cattle on that? Anybody know? Pretty good, isn't it? Well, how much is it? I know hamburgers like what? $5 a pound? What?
I think last year my grandpa sold some calves for close to 1,000 a piece.
Okay, let's just use that. So, when I own this land, cows are worth $50 a piece. So I don't have, the profit I'm going to make, I'm going to lease my land out to Blaine. Blaine is going to raise these cattle, and he's going to make the profit, and I'm going to charge him a percentage to use my land. Well, now all of a sudden cattle are worth $1,000 a piece. Well, am I going to let Blaine make that profit on my land? Heck no, I'm going to boot him off, and I'm going to start working the farm because I want to make the $1,000 a piece. And that's what happened is these English landowners realized they could make more money on wool and raw material on their own rather than lease their land to farmers. So all of a sudden, what's the story with these farmers? They're all displaced, right? So where do they go? They go to the New World. They go to the New World. Okay? They go to the New World. Now, you think these guys just pulled out a bunch of money and said, I'm going to go to the New World. I got all kinds of money. I'll just get on a boat. They'll take me over there. I got all kinds of money. What was the problem with the farmers getting to the New World? Could they afford to get there? No. Okay, they couldn't afford it. So they signed contracts called indentures. Indentures. They signed a contract called an indenture. Huh? Not like the Cottrell dentistry. Is that what you're thinking? You know what this is, don't you? Okay, what's an indenture? Mackenzie?
It's, you have to like work for someone for a certain amount of years.
In exchange for what? What you don't have, right? So what didn't they have? Money for what? Transportation to America. So they signed indentures or contracts, which she's exactly right, almost t-shirt material, but not quite.
I know that from a Barbie movie.
Barbie movie. Well, we'll see how that...
She's an indentured servant.
No, you're getting ahead of me, but it's awesome. So we're going to talk about this. So they signed a contract, these farmers and their wives, men and women, signed these contracts called indentures, which states that they will work for a period of time. In this case, they worked from 2 to 7 years, depending on the contract they signed, in exchange for getting to be transported over to America. So when they get over to America, they got to work 2 to 7 years just to pay off their trip. Okay? And because that sounded a little bit tough go, the people that signed these indentures became known as indentured servants, which is a little nicer than slaves to a point. But they weren't slaves, but they were indentured servants. Okay? Indentured servants. So what we have here in essence is the start of people moving to the New World. And what we're going to do in the next test material, just to give you kind of an idea, is we're going to talk about the settlement of the northern colonies, the northern 13 colonies. Then we're going to have a test on that. Then we're going to talk about the settlement of the middle 13 colonies, then the southern 13 colonies, and then we're going to get into some things that make these new colonists mad, like the Sugar Act and the Stamp Act, and it's going to lead us to a revolution. And then we're going to talk about the Revolutionary War, and then we're going to talk about Washington's presidency, and that's kind of where we're headed. Does that make sense? Okay, what we're going to do now is I'm going to give you a little review. And what I want you to do is I want you to know that these things that I tell you are probably going to be on your quiz that we're going to take. Now let me tell you how this works, just so you know. I am not foolish enough to know that how many people won't be here tomorrow, which is Friday. So if we had a test tomorrow, that makes a hell of a lot of work for who? Me, because I got to make one. How many again are going to be gone? I got to make 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 6, maybe 7 different tests, which I don't want to do. So I kind of work with that. We're not going to stop the world on Fridays, but we're going to pay attention to what's going on. So I'm going to give you a review. Let me think on this one. I'm going to give you a little bit of a review today. I'm going to reiterate that review tomorrow. And then we're going to have a quiz when?
Monday.
Now, let's talk about that. What? Who said that? Broger, why would you say that? Well, he's... Okay. Why? You don't like tests on Monday? Well, okay, Blaine, you tell me why you don't like quizzes or tests on Monday. He is right. You go through the weekend. Now, what's the purpose of me? This is great. What's the purpose of me giving you a quiz or a test, Miss McGarvin? Why do I even do that? Because I love to make you miserable?
Yes.
Why do I give you an assessment on what I have told you? See what you learn. So when you and I could really get myself in trouble. I'll try not to. Testing is an interesting anomaly, and I want to talk to you about this so you understand it. The purpose of giving you a quiz or a test is to find out what you know. I want valid information on what McGarvin knows. If she sat here and just slept with her eyes open and didn't learn a thing, or she really learned something. Or Courtney's back there. So I know, Courtney's kind of quiet. She didn't say much, but I got to figure out if she knows anything. Okay, that's what we give quizzes and tests for. So if I give you a test on a Monday, which means, Blaine has a good point, that you may forget to do that work on the weekend because it's your weekend. You've been here for 5 days. Hotter than hell in here, am I wrong? And you're just dying. And this guy here, the AP teacher, thinks he's pretty hot stuff, and he wants me to work over the weekend too. How many have teachers that do that? I struggle a little bit with that. I think the weekend might be your time to relax. And so I'm not a big test giver on Mondays. Now, even if I was, let's say I didn't care if you had a good weekend or not, I didn't care about you much at all, and I said we're going to have a test on Monday. So if I give you that test on Monday, do I have a better chance of knowing what you really know on the test on Monday after you might have forgotten about studying, or would I have a better idea what you know Tuesday? Tuesday. So that's why I do that. Now, not everybody does that. And it gets kind of tough because most teachers want to give you a test the day you're here because it's a pain when you're not. Okay? So sometimes you have multiple tests on those particular days. But what we're going to do is we're going to get through this material and give you some supplemental stuff in a review. And I'm going to guarantee you that we will have a quiz test, I'll call it, on Tuesday next week. Anybody going to be gone that day? I'm hoping not. That's why I do it. So what we'll do is we'll review a little bit here. Tomorrow we'll have a little bit of a off-the-wall history thing. Sometimes on Fridays what I do if there's people gone is I'll show a video on Marine One so you know what the President's helicopter is like. Or I might show you a video on inside the White House, the secrets of the White House. Just some things to kind of teach you a little more. I don't know, I got all kinds of those kind of things, okay? So that's kind of what we do. And then Monday when we come back we'll kind of refresh your memory, right? And then we'll go from there. Okay, so let's have a little review here. Here's what I think you should know. I would tell you right now that I would know every single ID. That's why I put them on there. Because those are going to be used in the form of multiple choice, true and false, short answer, or fill in the blanks. Guaranteed. So I'd know some of these, but I'll even go further and tell you which ones I'd really know. How's that sound? I would certainly know what a charter is, and I'm pretty confident that Chantal Barr is going to get this one correct. And it is, again, what?
Document granting rights.
A document granting rights. So I'd know what a charter was. I would obviously know what the Virginia Company of London was, and I'd know who King James was. That would be pretty good things to know. You know, another thing I would know as we go through our notes just from start to finish, and this is why I said to you, you know, it'd be nice to have a highlighter. Because if you had a highlighter right now, you could just be highlighting this in your notes and then you wouldn't have to worry about this. Night, Beth, you're making up for that tardy yesterday, that girl. I would know the two main attractions that the Virginia Company of London was looking for when they sent settlers over to America. They were looking for what? They were looking for so-called gold and a passageway through America to the East Indies. I would know that. Okay? I would know, when you talk about the English settlement in Jamestown, how many ships were sent on that Virginia Company of London expedition, and how many settlers went with them, and maybe I'd even know their gender. And I'd really like to know where they landed. It'd be nice to know where they landed. Now, dates. Listen to me on dates. I'm not a big dates guy. Okay? If you see dates on a test in the form of true or false or whatever, the date will never make it incorrect. The date will always be correct. So don't get hung up on dates, okay? I'd also like to know when those poor buggers landed with those 3 ships, how many of them kicked the bucket before they ever got there, and what happened to the ones that were survived as soon as they landed. So this is all making sense? I would know the conditions of the area that they chose in the wooden banks of the James River. What were the conditions in that great defense area? They picked a good place for defense, but what were the conditions like? Okay, full of mosquitoes, horribly mosquito infested, and devastatingly unhealthy. Devastatingly unhealthy. And I'd like you to know, just off the top of your mind, in the first expedition, the first ships that came over, who was the real winner? Anybody remember who the was? The buzzards were really the only real winners. Okay? Then they sent a second expedition. I'd know a little bit about that. You know, how many ships.